A marriage of 10 years. I thought I had it all. A capable husband, esteemed in-laws who had always cherished me, and a career many envied. Marketing director at Sterling Textiles, the FTSE 250 company my father had built from the ground up. I was living a life of quiet satisfaction, until a single text message on a Friday afternoon shattered everything. I was chairing the final quarterly strategy meeting of the year when my phone buzzed softly on the polished mahogany table. It was from Chloe, my best friend since our university days at Cambridge. "Eleanor, where are you?" "It's urgent." I frowned. With a subtle nod to my assistant to continue the presentation, I slipped out of the boardroom. I called Chloe back immediately. Her voice on the other end was unusually frantic. "Chloe? What is it? You sound like you're in a panic." "Eleanor, listen to me and stay calm. Your husband, Julian, he's not on a business trip to Edinburgh, is he?" My heart gave a single, heavy thud. "What are you talking about?" "He called this morning to say he'd arrived safely." "No, Eleanor." Chloe's voice was close to a sob. "My cousin works for British Airways. She just sent me a photo. Julian is at Heathrow right now. He's checking in for a flight to California, and he's not alone." A roaring sound filled my ears, but I fought to keep my voice from trembling. "Who is he with?" "His entire family. Your in-laws, his sister and her husband, and a young, very pregnant woman. They all look so close, Eleanor." His mother was stroking the woman's stomach. Every word from Chloe was a shard of ice piercing my heart. California. A pregnant woman, his entire family. The scattered fragments clicked together with blinding speed, forming a picture of unimaginable cruelty. I ended the call, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. I walked back into the boardroom, my face a mask of professional composure. "That concludes today's meeting," I announced, my voice steady and clear. "I need detailed reports from all of you by 9 a.m. tomorrow, via email. Dismissed." My team, though slightly surprised by the abrupt end, complied without question. The moment the door clicked shut, I grabbed my car keys and ran to the underground car park. I had to go. I had to see it with my own eyes. No matter how brutal the truth, I had to face it. My car sped through the congested London traffic, but my own world was eerily silent. What did I do wrong in these 10 years? I had given my heart to his family, treating his parents as my own. After my father passed away, they were my emotional bedrock. I shouldered the responsibility of Sterling Textiles, working alongside Julian to grow the empire, to make him proud of his wife. We didn't have children. It was my greatest sorrow, but Julian always comforted me, saying it didn't matter. It turned out it was all a lie. It wasn't that it didn't matter to him. It was that he'd already found someone else to bear his child. Heathrow was a chaotic symphony of announcements and hurried footsteps. I pulled a baseball cap low over my face, hiding behind sunglasses and a mask as I blended into the crowd. And then I saw them, near the business class check-in. His family, a picture of convivial warmth. Julian, the man I slept beside every night, was there. His arm was wrapped around the shoulder of a beautiful young woman whose belly was swollen with life. His mother, who always held my hand and urged me to take care of my health, was tenderly handing that woman a warm cup of milk. His father, a man I respected like my own, was chatting cheerfully with his daughter's family. They were a perfect, happy family. And in that picture, I was a complete stranger. I watched from a distance. The way Julian looked at her, It was a look I had once received, but hadn't seen in a very long time. A look of love, adoration, and hope. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and she laughed, leaning her head playfully on his shoulder. The sight didn't make me want to scream or lose my mind in a fit of rage. It simply chilled my heart, turning it into a solid block of ice. Betrayal from one person is painful enough. This was a betrayal from everyone I loved and trusted most. Together, they had staged a perfect play, and I was the sole, unwitting audience member. They were joyfully awaiting a new life. The grandson, my mother-in-law, had so desperately yearned for, built upon my pain and deception. They weren't going on holiday. They were going to America for the birth of a child. A meticulously planned and clearly long-running scheme. I didn't approach them. I didn't cause a scene. I quietly took out my phone and took several pictures from afar, clear enough to capture every face, every happy expression. It would be my first piece of evidence. Only after they passed through security did I turn and walk away. No tears fell, but something inside me had died completely. 10 years of love, trust, and respect had been reduced to ashes right here in this airport. Stepping out of the terminal and into the cold night air, I took a deep breath. I knew that the Eleanor Vance of yesterday no longer existed. From now on, there would be a different Eleanor, an Eleanor who would reclaim everything that belonged to her and to her father, no matter the cost. I drove to the elegant Kensington townhouse we had called home. The spacious house, once our sanctuary, felt cavernous and unnervously cold. The scent of the white lilies I loved still lingered in the air, but instead of bringing peace, it felt suffocating, a mockery. Every object in the house, from the large wedding portrait in the living room to Julian's neatly placed slippers by the door, was now evidence of a cruel lie. I didn't allow myself a moment of weakness. I went straight to the second-floor study. It was where the most important things were kept. I opened the heavy-duty safe my father had installed years ago. Inside, besides some jewelry, were all the property deeds, contracts, and most importantly, my father's will and the share certificates for my controlling stake in Sterling Textiles. My father had always taught me to be an independent, strong woman, capable of protecting myself in any situation. Perhaps he had sensed something, preparing everything with such care. He had left the majority of the company's shares to me. Julian held only a minor stake, just enough to maintain his seat on the board. My father had called it my wedding gift, and a shield that would protect me for life. Only now did I truly grasp the profound meaning of his words. I took out all the important documents and arranged them carefully in a leather briefcase. Then I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and made my first call. The person I called was Mr. Alistair Finch, my father's most trusted solicitor, and a man I also trusted implicitly. He answered almost immediately, his voice as warm and calm as ever. "Eleanor, my dear, Alistair Finch here. To what do I owe the pleasure at this hour?" I took a breath, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Alistair, I need your help. It's a matter of great urgency." Sensing the gravity in my tone, his voice became serious. "Of course. Tell me. I'm listening. I need you to prepare for a divorce, and I believe my husband, Julian Croft, has been embezzling funds from Sterling Textiles and committing financial fraud. I need you to help me investigate and gather evidence." There was a short silence on the other end. Alistair must have been stunned. He had known Julian and me from the beginning. He had even been the legal witness at our wedding. "Eleanor, what on earth has happened?" Is this some sort of misunderstanding between you two? It's no misunderstanding, I replied, my voice several degrees colder. He has another woman, and they are expecting a child. His entire family deceived me, taking her to the United States to give birth. I saw them with my own eyes at the airport this afternoon. I heard Alistair let out a deep sigh. I see. This is unexpected. Very well. First, calm yourself. Leave everything to me. It is imperative they do not know you are aware of anything. Act as you normally would. I will contact a specialist I know in the U.S. to gather evidence there. As for the financial matters, do you have any specific suspicions? I suspect he's been funneling money through shell corporations disguised as contracts and through our charitable foundation specifically, the Vance Sterling Trust, the one in my father's name. I need a full audit of the trust's transactions for the last 3 years. Consider it done, Alistair said firmly. You are the majority shareholder and the founder's daughter. You have every right to request that information. And Eleanor, take care of yourself. You cannot afford to collapse now. Remember that my colleagues and I, your father's loyal allies, are always by your side. After the call, I felt a flicker of strength return. I was not alone in this fight. I immediately began my own work. Using my top-level administrator access to the company's servers, I secretly backed up all emails, work chats, and related files associated with Julian from the past 3 years. I also reviewed the security camera systems at both the office and our home. Footage of Julian on clandestine calls, his suspicious departures from the house, everything was carefully saved. As night deepened, the townhouse was enveloped in silence. I sat alone in the middle of the large living room, the glow from my laptop screen illuminating my expressionless face. The pain still burned low in my chest, but it no longer had the power to break me. It had transformed into the fuel for a fire of anger and resolve. They may have started this play, but I would be the one to write its ending. And I vowed that the finale would be a nightmare they would never forget. My melodrama had just begun. On Monday morning, I was in Alistair Finch's office in Mayfair. The look on his face was a mixture of fatigue and concern. He made me a cup of chamomile tea and spoke softly. Eleanor, I know this is incredibly difficult, but you must remain strong. He gestured to a file on his desk. I've had a preliminary look at the financial reports from the Vance Sterling Trust. Over the last 3 years, a significant amount of money has been paid out under the guise of young talent support and overseas study scholarships. And the recipient for all of them was a single name. Isabella Rossi. Does that name mean anything to you? Isabella Rossi. My heart clenched. The image of the beautiful, yet somehow defiant-looking young woman from the airport surfaced in my mind. I believe that's her, Alistair. He nodded, his expression hardening. I thought as much. I've contacted the specialist I mentioned. His name is Mr. Davies, a very capable and discreet private investigator who specializes in cases involving British nationals abroad. He's taken the case and is already at work. We should have information soon. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, an encrypted email from Mr. Davies arrived via Alistair. It contained a compressed file full of photographs and a concise report. With a trembling hand, I opened the pictures one by one. The first was of a luxurious villa in a quiet, residential area in California. A white sports car, a model, Julian had once described as his dream car, was parked in the driveway. The second photo showed Julian and Isabella in a supermarket, pushing a shopping trolley. They looked for all the world like newlyweds, setting up their home. Isabella was leaning her head on his shoulder, his hand resting protectively on her belly. The next photos were even more brutal. The entire Croft family was having a cheerful dinner in the villa's back garden. My mother-in-law was placing food on Isabella's plate, my father-in-law beaming. Julian's sister and her husband were there too, chatting intimately with their new sister-in-law. They were a real family. I was just an outsider. There was also a video of Julian helping Isabella on a walk through a park. They held hands, stopping occasionally to kiss. The sight of their happiness filled me with a wave of nausea. But what stunned me most was the final part of the report. Mr. Davies had investigated the villa's lease agreement, the car purchase contract, and the prenatal care registration at a high-end international maternity hospital. Everything was in Julian and Isabella's names. And then, the final, devastating piece of information. Mr. Davies had traced the first wire transfer from Julian to Isabella. It was dated 3 years ago. 3 years. It wasn't a momentary lapse, not a new affair. It was a calculated, systematic deception that had spanned a third of our marriage. For the last 3 years, while I worked myself to the bone at Sterling Textiles, while I lay awake at night, grieving my inability to conceive, my husband was building another family. For the last 3 years, while I cherished my in-laws as my staunchest supporters, they were busy covering up their son's sins and joyfully awaiting the arrival of a grandchild born of deceit. All their concern, all their kind words, were nothing but a poorly rehearsed play. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. My opulent office suddenly felt suffocating. I didn't cry. Tears now were a luxury, a pointless indulgence. The pain had morphed into something else, something colder and sharper. It was determination. The evidence was here. It was undeniable. It was not only the weapon that would end this marriage, but also a daily reminder of their cruelty. They took 10 years of my youth, my trust, and my love. Now, I would take back everything that belonged to me and everything they owed my father. A few days later, while trying to lose myself in work, a video call from my mother-in-law lit up my phone. The sight of her smiling face on the screen made my stomach churn, but I quickly composed myself, took a deep breath, and answered with a bright, practiced smile. "Margaret, hello. It's lovely to see you. Are you and everyone else having a good time?" "Oh, we are, darling," she said, her voice as sweet as ever. "The air here is so fresh and clean. I was just calling to see how my dear daughter was managing all alone at home. Not working too hard, I hope? You look a little pale." I performed my part perfectly, touching my cheek. "Oh, you know how it is. It's the end of the year, so things are a bit hectic. But I'm eating well, so please don't worry." She sighed, her eyes full of feigned sympathy. "Eleanor, darling, work is important, but family is more important. You and Julian have been married for 10 years now. It's high time you thought about a baby. Richard and I are just dying to hold a grandchild. I have an idea. Why don't you wrap things up there and come join us for a few days? You can relax, have a change of scenery. The medical technology here is excellent, you know. Who knows? We might get some good news." Her words made me want to laugh out loud. Who was she performing for? She knew perfectly well why I didn't need to try anymore. The grandchild she so eagerly awaited was growing in another woman's womb, in the very house she was staying in. Her nagging was just a pretext, a way to justify the imminent arrival of her new grandchild. It was all part of their flawless act. I forced a sad smile. "I want that more than anything, Margaret. Perhaps it's just not meant to be for us yet. Once this busy period is over, I promise I'll get properly checked again." Just then, my father-in-law appeared on screen, waving with his usual benevolent smile. "Eleanor, it's Richard. With Julian away on business, you must be working twice as hard. Make sure you look after yourself, my dear. Don't overdo it." "I'm fine, Richard. Thank you. You and Margaret take care of your health, too." Another blatant lie. Away on business. From the oldest to the youngest, his family were all magnificent actors. Together they covered up the crime. Together they trampled on my emotions and trust. They thought I was a fool, easily swayed by sweet words and fake concern. The moment the call ended, the smile vanished from my face. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the bustling traffic below. Their hypocrisy was sickening. For 10 years, I had lived among wolves in sheep's clothing. They petted me and pretended to love me, all while sharpening their knives behind my back. I had seen enough of this play. It was time for me to bring down the curtain. But before I did, I would make sure every actor in this farce paid a very, very high price for their role. Before the disgust for my in-laws could subside, another blade plunged straight into my heart. This one was forged from my father's legacy, making it all the sharper, all the more cruel. That morning, Alistair summoned me to his office, his expression graver than I had ever seen. He placed a thick binder on the desk. "Eleanor, you need to prepare yourself for what you're about to see." He opened the binder to the detailed expenditure reports from the Vance Sterling Trust. As we know, Julian Croft has been sending money to this Isabella Rossi in the guise of scholarships. However, the scale is far greater than we imagined. We're not talking about a few £100,000. We're talking about tens of millions, funneled in smaller, disguised payments over 3 years. Tens of millions. It felt as if a giant hand was squeezing my chest. That charitable trust was my father's lifeblood. It was established to help underprivileged but bright students, to bring the light of knowledge to struggling communities. And Julian Croft, the son-in-law my father had trusted so deeply, had dared to turn it into his personal cash machine for his mistress. He had used my father's sweat and blood, the donor's money meant for textbooks and school buildings, to buy her a fine house and an expensive car. "The bastard," I hissed through gritted teeth, unable to contain my rage for the first time. "He's not even human." Alistair placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Easy, Eleanor. Anger won't solve this. We need cool heads. And this," he said, pushing another set of documents towards me, "is the most critical part. Julian's assistant sent this to your office this morning. She said he needs your urgent signature to finalize the end-of-year audit. Take a look." I picked up the document. The cover read, "Annual Audit and Transaction Confirmation." The contents were seemingly standard clauses confirming the company's investments and transactions for the past fiscal year. Nothing seemed out of place. It was a routine procedure we did every year. "What's wrong with it, Alistair?" I asked. He flipped to the last page, to a tiny block of text in an appendix. "Here, Appendix 7, HDCNS. Does that reference number look familiar?" I squinted, looking closer. My heart stopped. It was the reference number for the share delegation and transfer agreement my father had drawn up for me. The tiny print read, "The undersigned hereby agrees, for the purpose of restructuring and investment expansion of Sterling Textiles, to unconditionally transfer 20% of their personal shareholding in Sterling Textiles to Director Julian Croft." This was his real goal. Not just money, but the entire company. My father's whole legacy. He was using my trust and my work habits, setting a subtle trap to trick me into signing a document that would make me lose everything. If I hadn't been vigilant, if I had just skimmed and signed as usual, it would have been over. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. "What a vicious scheme," Alistair said, his voice laced with contempt. "He sees you as a naive child he can easily manipulate. He's already done the maths. Once he gets this 20%, combined with his existing shares and the support of other shareholders he's bought off, he'll have enough power to force you out of the boardroom." I stared at the paper, my hatred reaching its peak. But then, an idea sparked in my mind. He wanted to set a trap? Fine. I would turn that very trap into his tomb. I looked up, meeting Alistair's gaze directly. My voice was eerily calm. "Alistair, let's use this. I'll sign the contract." Alistair was taken aback. "What are you talking about, Eleanor? Are you mad? If you sign this, you lose everything." "No, Alistair," I said with a cold smile. "I will sign, but not now. I'll stall. Tell him I need to review it more carefully. In the meantime, we prepare another contract, one with the same format, but with the exact opposite content. If he wants to play with words, I'll play along. If he thinks he can trick me, I'll trick him right back. When the time comes, the one signing their own death warrant won't be me. It will be him." Seeing the resolve in my eyes, Alistair's expression shifted from shock to understanding, and finally, to a firm nod. "Very well, as you wish. It's high time this old fox saw what it's like to be caught in a trap." Over the next few days, I threw myself into work with a manic intensity. By day, I was the capable, decisive marketing director, smoothly steering all our year-end campaigns. By night, I was hunched over financial reports with Alistair and his team, tracing the paths of Julian's dirty money. The combined weight of work stress, the pain of betrayal, and the tension of plotting my revenge began to take its toll. My weight plummeted, and I started experiencing stomach cramps. At first, they were a dull ache, but they gradually intensified into sharp, stabbing pains. I dismissed it as stress and an irregular diet, popping a few antacids and diving back into my work. Then, one Wednesday morning, I was in front of the entire executive board, presenting our strategy for the new year. I was speaking about an ambitious plan for overseas market expansion, a project I had poured my heart into, when a sudden, excruciating pain tore through my abdomen as if a knife were being twisted in my gut. My vision went black. I barely managed to grab the edge of the lectern before my legs gave way. The last thing I heard before losing consciousness was my assistant's frantic shout and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. When I woke up, the sterile, antiseptic smell of a hospital filled my nostrils. I was in a stark white bed, an IV drip attached to my arm. Chloe was sitting beside me, her eyes red from crying. She grabbed my hand the moment I opened my eyes. "Eleanor, you're awake! You scared the life out of me." "I'm fine," I whispered, my throat parched, just a bit tired. Just then, a kind-faced, older doctor entered the room. He looked at me with a pained expression before turning to Chloe. "Could I have a moment alone with the patient, please?" Chloe nodded and reluctantly left the room. Once we were alone, the doctor sat down quietly. "Miss Vance, my name is Dr. Harrison. I'm the head of gastroenterology. We ran some tests and an endoscopy. We found a tumor in your stomach." My heart felt like it had stopped beating. "A tumor? Is it serious, doctor?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. Dr. Harrison, Sahil. We've sent a biopsy for analysis, but from the endoscopic images and my experience, it is highly likely to be early-stage stomach cancer. The presentation is very similar to that of your late father, Mr. Robert Vance. He was also a patient of mine. Stomach cancer. The very disease that had taken my father 5 years ago. History was repeating itself with cruel precision. The shock was too sudden, too immense. Why now? When I needed my health and my wits about me more than ever, fate had handed me a death sentence. The tears I had suppressed for so long finally broke free. I was strong, I was resilient, but in the face of my own mortality, I was just a vulnerable woman. The old doctor waited patiently for my sobs to subside. When I had calmed down a little, he continued gently, "Eleanor, I know this is a terrible shock, but medicine has advanced significantly in the last 5 years. Because we caught it early, the prognosis is very good. We need to schedule surgery to remove the tumor as soon as possible, followed by chemotherapy to eradicate any remaining cancer cells. You must have faith. You must stay positive." I wiped my tears and looked out the window. The sky was still blue, the sun was warm, and life went on. I couldn't die. Not now. I had too much to do. The people who had wronged me and my father were still out there, living their lives. I couldn't let it end like this. The shock didn't break me. It made me stronger. It gave me a reason and a deadline to finish everything. I turned back to Dr. Harrison, my gaze now firm. "Thank you, doctor. I will have the surgery, but can you give me 2 more weeks? There is something of critical importance that I must finish." "Just 2 weeks." Dr. Harrison hesitated, but seeing the unwavering determination in my eyes, he finally nodded. "All right. 2 weeks. But after that, you must be admitted immediately. Not a day's delay. Your life must be the priority. Understand?" "Yes, I promise." After the doctor left, I closed my eyes. A new plan, bolder and more urgent, began to take shape in my mind. 2 weeks. That was all the time I had to end everything. My revenge was no longer just a fight for my inheritance. It was now a race against time, a gamble for my life that I could not afford to lose. I lay in the hospital bed, feigning calm, as Chloe peeled an apple, endlessly nagging me for neglecting my health. I listened quietly, mentally rehearsing every step of the life or death gamble I was about to undertake over the next 2 weeks. Just then, the tablet on my bedside table lit up. A video call from Julian. My heart tightened. I signaled for Chloe to be quiet, took a deep breath, composed my hair, and answered with a smile that was as natural, yet fragile, as I could manage. Julian's face appeared, etched with what looked like genuine concern. But I knew now what cunning calculations and hypocrisy lay behind that expression. "Darling, are you all right? I was so worried when I heard you collapsed at the office. What did the doctor say? Is it serious?" He fired off a volley of worried questions. I coughed lightly, clutching my chest, playing the role of a weak patient. "I'm okay, Julian. It's just low blood pressure from overworking. The doctor said I'll be fine after a few days' rest. Don't worry. I would never let him know about the tumor. His pity was something I didn't need, and more importantly, it would ruin my plans. He had to believe I was still the healthy, easily manipulated fool he took me for." Julian let out a theatrical sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God. You really gave me a fright. You must take better care of yourself. What's more important than your health? I feel so guilty being so far away, unable to look after you. His sweet words made me sick to my stomach. Guilty? If he were truly guilty, he wouldn't be on the other side of the world, doting on another woman and their unborn child. After a few more empty pleasantries, he finally got to his point. "Ah, darling, I know you're tired, but there's something urgent. Have you seen the documents my assistant sent over? Our partners here are pushing for a decision. If we don't act fast, we could lose this major investment opportunity. It's crucial for the company, for our future." The fox was finally showing his tail. I deliberately furrowed my brow, feigning fatigue. I think I saw them, but I've been so exhausted. My head's been spinning. I haven't been able to read anything. I'll have to look at them after I'm discharged. Right now, the words just blur together. A flash of impatience crossed Julian's face, but he quickly masked it. "I know you're tired, darling, but please help me out here. You just need to sign the last page. I've gone through all the other clauses meticulously. There's nothing to worry about. Just a little push. For our future. For our future." How happy those words would have made me in the past. Now, they were simply revolting. I certainly had no place in the future he was envisioning. "I'll see," I replied, my tone slightly petulant. "Here I am, sick in bed, and all you can do is worry me with work. It feels like you don't care about me at all." "No, darling. Of course I care." More than anything, Julian placated hurriedly. "Should I call my mother and ask her to come look after you for a few days?" He even dared to mention his mother. What a perfect, coordinated performance. I shook my head. "No, it's fine. Chloe's here. It's too much for your mother to travel all this way. Let her rest." The call ended after a few more meaningless exchanges. The moment the screen went dark, the smile on my face disappeared. I felt drained, not from my illness, but from the sheer effort of the performance. Julian was getting anxious. That was a good sign. The fish was starting to nibble at the bait. I would make him wait a little longer. Let him grow more desperate. The more impatient he became, the more likely he was to make a mistake. While I was recuperating at home after my discharge, Chloe practically moved in to take care of me. More than my physical health, she was 10 times more worried about my mental state. She watched me with pity, seeing me pale and exhausted, yet with a constant, calculating glint in my eyes. One evening, Chloe sat beside me and said seriously, "Eleanor, I know you have a plan, and I support you. But how can you handle all of this alone? You need more help." "I have Alistair," I replied. "Alistair can only help with the legal side. What about everything else? Have you thought about what will happen when this all comes out? The Croft family will use the press to slander you, to turn you from the victim into the villain. They have money and connections. They're more than capable of it." Chloe's words were like a splash of cold water. She was right. I hadn't considered that angle. I had been so focused on gathering evidence and protecting my assets that I had forgotten about the other front in this war, public opinion. As I fell silent, Chloe continued, "I have a cousin, an investigative journalist named Ben Carter. He's brilliant, righteous, and has a particular hatred for hypocrites. I think he can help you. Will you meet him?" I nodded immediately, without hesitation. This was the missing piece of my puzzle. The meeting took place in a small cafe, tucked away in a quiet mews. Ben Carter was younger than I expected, tall and lean with sharp eyes behind black-rimmed glasses. As I laid out my story concisely, without exaggeration or sentiment, just the facts, he listened in silence. "Miss Vance," he said finally, "if what you're telling me is true, this isn't just a family scandal. This is a large-scale, white-collar crime. Embezzlement of charitable funds, creation of shell companies for capital flight. These charges alone could put your husband in prison for a very long time. I know, I said firmly, sliding a USB stick across the table. This contains some of what I have. I need you to dig deeper into the shell companies he established and his offshore money trail. And most importantly, I need you to be ready. When the time comes, I want everything to break simultaneously across all media outlets. I want him and his entire family left with absolutely no room for denial. Ben took the USB stick. His eyes gleamed with the excitement of a journalist on the verge of a major story. Don't worry, Miss Vance. This is exactly the kind of story I live for. Justice needs to be served. I'll start immediately. We'll stay in touch through Chloe. With Ben on my side, I felt like a tiger that had grown wings. But I knew that to truly destroy the Croft family, I had to attack what they were most proud of. Their reputation as an esteemed family. And I had found a fatal weakness. Through one of my father's old contacts, Alistair had discovered a shocking secret about my father-in-law. Before marrying Julian's mother, Richard Croft had been deeply in love with a woman named Eleanor Morgan. He had abandoned her, pregnant with his child, to marry into the wealthier family of Julian's mother. The child was eventually miscarried. For decades, Miss Morgan had lived a quiet, solitary life in a modest flat. I decided to visit her. It was a drizzly afternoon when I found the old apartment building where she lived. The woman who opened the door had silver hair and a face deeply etched with the lines of time. But her eyes were still clear and beautiful. She looked at me with suspicion. I didn't beat around the bush. Good afternoon, Miss Morgan. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am Richard Croft's daughter-in-law. At the mention of his name, the color drained from her face. She tried to close the door, but I quickly blocked it with my hand. Please, wait. I haven't come with ill intentions. I am also a victim of that family's deceit. I want to reclaim justice for myself, and perhaps for you. Perhaps the sincerity in my eyes moved her. She let me in. The flat was small but tidy. As I told my story, she remained silent, occasionally wiping away a quiet tear that trickled down her cheek. When I finished, she opened an old wooden box and took out a bundle of yellowed letters and a few black and white photographs. This is all he left me, she said, her voice soft but brittle. Vows of eternal love, promises of a happy future. In the end, all that was left was abandonment and pain. She handed them to me. Take them. If they can help expose his true character, then my decades of sacrifice won't have been in vain. I accepted the mementos, my heart heavy. I bowed my head in gratitude and left. The rain outside had stopped. With Richard Croft's love letters in my hand, I knew I had acquired another sharp weapon. I would not only bury Julian socially, but also rip the mask of hypocrisy his entire family had worn for decades. The next day, I received a call from Dr. Harrison. The biopsy results were in. I drove to the hospital alone, my mind strangely calm. I was prepared for the worst. And when Dr. Harrison, with a look of regret, quietly confirmed his initial diagnosis, early-stage adenocarcinoma, I simply nodded. There were no tears, no panic, just a cold, clear reality. The 14-day countdown had begun. That night, I told Chloe. I couldn't hide it anymore. Sitting in the quiet living room of the townhouse, I showed her the medical report. She stared at the paper, then at me, her eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. "No," she stammered, her voice trembling. "This can't be right. Eleanor, this has to be a mistake. The hospital must have made a mistake." She clutched the paper and started to cry. "You have to have the surgery now. Nothing else matters. Your health is the most important thing. Forget that bastard. Forget the company. You have to live." I took her trembling hands in mine and squeezed them tight. "Chloe, listen to me. I am going to have the surgery. I promised the doctor. But not now." "Why?" she shouted, hysterical. "Why not now? You're gambling with your life. Do you realize that?" "I know," I said, looking her straight in the eye, my voice firm and clear. "And that's precisely why I can't go under the knife like this. Chloe, Sterling Textiles isn't just an asset. It's my father's entire life's work. I can't let it fall into the hands of the scoundrel who deceived me and embezzled from my father's own charity to support his mistress. If something were to happen to me on the operating table, Julian would be the legal heir to a portion of my estate. He would use that to maintain his grip on the company. If that happens, I won't be able to rest in peace. I would rather die than see my father's legacy defiled by a man like that." The conviction in my voice silenced Chloe. She looked at me and, perhaps for the first time, saw the fire burning in my eyes. It wasn't the fire of blind hatred, but of responsibility and protection. "I only have 2 weeks," I continued, my voice softer. "In these 2 weeks, I have to end everything. I have to lure Julian back, trick him into signing documents that forfeit all his rights. Only after I've secured my inheritance can I go into that operating theater with peace of mind. Whatever the outcome, I will have fulfilled my duty as a daughter. Do you understand?" Without a word, Chloe pulled me into a hug and sobbed. I patted her back gently. I knew she cared for me, worried for me. But in this game, I was the only one who could play the hand I was dealt. It was a life or death gamble, with my life and my father's legacy on the line, and I had no choice but to win. That night, after Chloe had fallen asleep, I sat alone in my father's study. I opened a drawer and took out an old photograph of him. In the photo, he was smiling brightly, his eyes kind and warm. I gently stroked his face in the picture. "Father," I whispered, "trust me. I won't let you down. I will protect Sterling Textiles, protect everything you left behind, no matter what it takes." The first and most crucial step in this life or death gamble was to secure the heart of Sterling Textiles, the shares my father had left me. If Julian got his hands on them, everything else would be meaningless. I couldn't confront him directly on this. He had the advantage of being my legal husband. I needed a surprise move he would never see coming. The next morning, I arranged a secret meeting with Alistair. The venue was not the office or a law firm, but a private villa at a country resort that had once belonged to my father. Only 3 guests were invited. Mr. Kim, the factory director who had been with my father since the company's inception, Mrs. Yoon, the scrupulous and diligent head of finance, and Mr. Choi, the loyal and steadfast logistics executive. They were not only key shareholders, but also elders I respected, people who had watched me grow up. When the 3 of them arrived, they all wore worried expressions. They had heard about my collapse and assumed I had called them to discuss my health. I sat them down, poured them tea myself, and got straight to the point. "Directors, I've called you here today to discuss a matter concerning the very survival of Sterling Textiles." I laid the irrefutable evidence on the table. The photos of Julian and his mistress in America, the bank statement showing tens of millions withdrawn from the charitable trust, and finally, the forged audit confirmation with the appendix to transfer 20% of my shares. The color drained from their faces. Worry turned to shock, and then to fury. Mr. Kim, the most hot-tempered of the three, slammed his fist on the table. That piece of filth. After the chairman trusted him so much, even gave him his most precious daughter. How dare he commit such a despicable act? He doesn't deserve to be at Sterling Textiles for another day. Mrs. Yoon was calmer, but a cold light glinted in her sharp eyes. This is an incredibly cunning and vicious scheme. He must have been planning this for a very long time. If you hadn't discovered it in time, Eleanor, Sterling Textiles might have already changed hands. I waited for their anger to subside before explaining my plan. I know Julian won't give up on this scheme. I will soon have to take some time off for medical treatment. During that time, I cannot allow my father's legacy to be at risk. So, I have a request to make of you three. It may be a very risky one, but I have no other choice. I paused, looking each of them directly in the eye. I would like to ask the three of you to temporarily hold 30% of my Sterling Textiles shares in trust. It will be in the form of a legally binding trust agreement, overseen by Mr. Finch. This will ensure my shares are no longer Julian's target, and more importantly, it will keep the core power of the group in the hands of those most loyal to my father. The three of them fell silent. They understood the gravity of the situation. To accept such a massive block of shares was not just an honor, but a heavy responsibility fraught with risk. At that moment, Alistair stepped in, explaining the legal provisions of the trust agreement in detail, assuring them that everything would be transparent and secure for all parties. After a long moment of consideration, Mr. Choi, the quietest of the three, spoke first. I remember the chairman once told us, "Sterling Textiles is my life, and Eleanor is my heart." Right now, both his life and his heart are under threat. We owe him everything. We have no reason to stand by and do nothing. Mr. Kim and Mrs. Yoon nodded in unison. We agree. We will hold them. Eleanor, you just focus on your treatment without any worries. We will be here. We will ensure that scoundrel Julian Croft cannot touch a single blade of grass at Sterling Textiles. Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced them back. I stood up and bowed deeply to the three of them. Thank you. I will never forget this kindness. The trust agreement was signed on the spot. Holding the fully executed contract in my hands, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. The first and most solid wall to protect my father's legacy had been erected. Now, I could proceed to the next step with confidence, setting the trap and waiting for the big fish to swim right into the net. With the walls around Sterling Textiles secured, I began to cast my net. I didn't have much time. I had to act quickly and decisively. The performance of a fake bankruptcy had officially begun. The first thing I did was to deliberately cultivate a haggard appearance. I didn't even have to act. The illness inside me, the sleepless nights, and the immense stress had already carved exhaustion and frailty onto my face. I stopped wearing makeup and chose loose, dark-colored suits to hide my wasting frame. Every time I went to the office, I walked with heavy steps, dark circles under my eyes, my gaze distant. The vibrant, energetic director was gone, replaced by a woman crushed under a heavy burden. Next, I started planting rumors. Not overtly, but through a few carefully chosen words dropped to the right people at the right time. At a lunch, with a few long-standing partners known for their gossip, I let slip a lament about a major export deal to Europe falling through, dealing a severe blow to the company's cash flow. I sadly confessed that I was trying to secure funds everywhere, but the situation was dire. That was enough. The rumor that Sterling Textiles was in financial crisis spread through the business community like wildfire. To add a layer of authenticity, I instructed the finance team, under Mrs. Yoon's supervision, to delay a few non-critical payments to smaller suppliers. Of course, Mrs. Yoon met with them privately to explain the situation and guarantee their interests. But to outsiders, it was a clear sign that Sterling Textiles was running out of money. But the most decisive blow was putting our townhouse up for sale. I called one of the city's top real estate agencies and requested to list our townhouse as an urgent sale at nearly 30% below market value. I stressed the condition that it had to be sold within 2 weeks to solve a company crisis. The news that a prime Kensington property was on the market at a fire sale price immediately rocked the wealthy circles and property news sites. Everyone believed that Robert Vance's daughter was selling her last asset to save her father's legacy. Everything was proceeding as I had planned. Employees at the company started whispering, and the work atmosphere grew tense. Some were already looking for new jobs. Our competitors were gloating, and at the center of the storm, I maintained an outward expression of anguish while feeling an eerie calm inside. The bait was scattered everywhere. The net was complete. All I had to do was wait for the greediest, most foolish fish to leap in on its own. With each passing day, the pain in my stomach reminded me that my time was running out. I wasn't scared. I was just impatient. He had to come back. He absolutely had to. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after the news of the townhouse sale broke, a call came from my mother-in-law in the middle of the night. I deliberately let it ring for a while, before answering with a sleepy, tired voice. "Hello? Who is this?" "Eleanor. It's me." "What on earth are you doing? Why are there rumors that you've put the house up for sale, and for practically nothing? Have you lost your mind?" Her voice on the other end was sharp and panicked. I remained silent for a moment, then started to sob. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry? Is sorry going to fix this? Tell me what happened. Is the company really in that much trouble?" I began the performance I had rehearsed. Through broken sobs, I told her about the canceled European contract, the partners' lawsuit for damages, the banks calling in our loans. I painted a grim picture of a powerful group on the verge of collapse. "It's all my fault," I wept. After Father died, and with Julian away on business, I couldn't handle it all by myself. I've ruined everything my father worked for his entire life. Margaret, if I don't sell the house now, I can't even pay the employees' salaries or the contract penalties. I might have to declare bankruptcy. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end. I knew my words had struck her greatest fear. The loss of money, the townhouse, and Sterling Textiles, the golden goose, their family's infinite cash machine. Bankruptcy? Don't be ridiculous. "Absolutely not," she shrieked. "You wait right there. I'm going to talk to Julian. He needs to come back at once. He has to save the company." She hung up abruptly. I put down the phone and wiped away my fake tears. A cold smile spread across my lips. It was all easier than I had thought. Their greed and ignorance were my greatest allies. As expected, about an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Julian. His voice was a mixture of concern and mild reprimand. "Eleanor, what are you doing? How could you let the company get into this state?" I've told you so many times if you're struggling, you need to tell me. I continued to play the role of the weak, incompetent wife. I'm sorry, Julian. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it on my own. I'm sorry. All right, stop crying, he cut in, his voice impatient but still feigning comfort. Don't do anything foolish. Do not sell the house, and do not sign any documents. Do you understand? I'm coming back right away. I've booked a flight. I'll be there the day after tomorrow. I'll handle everything when I get there. You just wait for me. Really, Julian? I asked, my voice filled with hope and gratitude. You're really coming back? Yes, I'm coming to help you. Don't you worry about a thing. He hung up. I sat in the darkness, perfectly still. The fish had taken the bait. Not just taken it, but was now rushing madly towards the hook, completely unaware. This return flight would be a one-way ticket to his ruin. Welcome back, my dear husband. I have a magnificent death warrant prepared just for you. 2 days later, on a chilly late autumn morning, Julian returned. I went to the airport to meet him. I deliberately wore a loose gray dress, my face bare of makeup, showcasing my fatigue and dark circles. When Julian emerged from the arrivals gate, he looked tired from the long flight. But he couldn't hide the smugness of a savior. He scanned me from head to toe, his expression a mixture of pity and distaste. Look at the state of you. Can't even manage things for a few weeks. Instead of a greeting, he threw a reprimand my way as he walked over with his suitcase. I played the part of the guilty wife perfectly, lowering my head. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. In the car on the way back, Julian relentlessly quizzed me about the company's situation. I detailed the crisis, the fabricated losses I had logically constructed, the mountains of difficulties I described so miserably. The more Julian heard, the more self-important he became. He began to lecture me, analyzing my mistakes, not forgetting to praise himself. See? I'm gone for a few weeks and this is what happens. Just leave everything to me. You just do as I say. As soon as we got home, he tossed his jacket on the sofa and got straight to the point. Right. Give me the specifics. What are the debts? Is there any way to raise capital? This was my moment to cast the final, decisive bait. I took out a thick binder prepared by Alistair and placed it on the table. Look at this, I said in a weak voice. I did my best. There's a private equity fund that's agreed to lend us a large sum to tide us over. But their conditions are very strict. They need collateral, and they insist that you, as the vice chairman, take personal responsibility. Julian snatched the binder and began to flip through it. The document was dozens of pages long, filled with complex clauses and difficult financial jargon that Alistair had deliberately included to confuse him. Debt restructuring, guarantee agreements, asset pledge agreements. Julian muttered the big headings as he read. He only skimmed the first few pages with the plausible-looking loan clauses, paying no attention to the appendices at the back. What are they asking for? He asked, his eyes still glued to the document. All of our joint assets, the townhouse, the cars, our savings accounts, have to be put up as collateral for the loan, I said, with a pained expression. And to prove management's commitment and capability, you have to sign a declaration taking full personal responsibility for this debt. It says that in a worst-case scenario, you voluntarily forfeit all control over those assets to prioritize repaying them. They said it's a necessary procedure to secure their investment. Julian frowned, lost in thought. Greed and overconfidence had paralyzed his reason. All he could see was the huge loan in front of him and the opportunity to save Sterling Textiles, thereby seizing all the power for himself. He thought that with the money, he could easily turn the company around, and then these collateral assets would be nothing. Besides, he believed that I, his weak and incompetent wife in his eyes, would never dare to pull any tricks. "Fine," he said decisively after a few minutes. "As long as it's money to save the company, we can earn back these assets 10 times over later. Give me a pen." With a trembling hand, I handed him the Mont Blanc fountain pen my father had given me. I watched as he unhesitatingly signed his name on each page of the contracts, agreements, and declarations. His signature, so clear and forceful on the legal documents that were, in fact, the death warrant for his future, was a testament to his foolishness and bottomless greed. When he put the pen down, I held my breath. It was done. The trap had closed. "There," he said, leaning back in his chair with satisfaction. "Now that I'm here, you can get some rest." I nodded, quietly gathering the documents. As my fingers touched the paper, still warm from his signature, a cold chill ran down my spine. He thought he had just signed a ticket to the pinnacle of his power. In reality, he had just personally signed the order for his own burial. A week after Julian's return, I was admitted to the hospital. My surgery was scheduled for the following Monday morning. In the final 10 days of my life or death gamble, I spent the time with Alistair, Ben Carter, and my father's loyal colleagues, finalizing all preparations. Everything was in place, waiting for D-Day. That morning, the London sky was overcast, a light drizzle falling. Chloe drove me to the hospital early. Changing into a patient's gown in my private room, I felt strangely light. The heavy burden that had been crushing me felt like it was about to be lifted. I held Chloe's hand and gave her my final instructions. "Chloe, if anything happens to me, please take care of the Vance Sterling Trust. Make sure it's never used for evil again." "Don't talk nonsense," Chloe chided, her eyes welling up. "You're going to be fine. The surgery will be a success. I'll be waiting for you right outside." I smiled. "I believe so too, but before I go in, I need you to send one text message." I gave her Alistair Finch's number. The message was 2 words: "Begin now." As I was being wheeled towards the operating theater, I saw Julian at the end of the corridor. He had probably come to play the role of the devoted husband to the very end. He came over, took my hand, his face a mask of concern. "Be strong, darling. I'll take care of everything out here. Don't worry about a thing. Just focus on getting better." I looked him straight in the eye, a deep gaze he could never comprehend. "Yes, I'm leaving everything in your hands." The heavy doors of the operating theater swung shut, sealing me off from the outside world. The bright surgical lights stung my eyes, and the smell of anesthetic began to fill the air. As my consciousness drifted into a hazy fog, I knew that in the world outside, a terrible storm was just beginning. Simultaneously, in his Mayfair office, Alistair Finch received the text from Chloe. He calmly picked up the phone and made 2 calls. The first was to his legal team waiting at the High Court. File the injunctions and the lawsuit. The second was to Ben Carter. Publish the stories. Instantly, the gears of justice and the media began to turn. At the Royal Courts of Justice, a thick divorce petition was filed, along with a criminal complaint against Julian Croft for fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and adultery. Every piece of evidence was attached: the photos and videos from America, the bank records, and the debt restructuring agreement Julian had just signed. At the headquarters of Sterling Textiles, Julian was sitting smugly in my father's office, planning an emergency board meeting where he would announce the restructuring and his takeover. Just then, the office doors burst open and uniformed police officers walked in. The lead detective spoke with a grim face. "Julian Croft? Metropolitan Police. We need you to come with us for questioning in relation to a complaint filed by your wife, Eleanor Vance." Julian froze, his face turning ashen. "What? What are you talking about? There must be some mistake." But no one answered him. At the same time, his phone began buzzing uncontrollably. The screens of major online news outlets were all flashing with shocking headlines. Sterling Textiles 5P, sued for adultery and multi-million-pound embezzlement. The articles were accompanied by crystal-clear photos of him, his mistress, and his family in California. Other articles exposed his offshore assets, the shell companies, and even his father's past betrayals. The storm hit so fast, so suddenly, that it gave him no time to prepare. All bank accounts in his and his family's names were frozen pending investigation. An order was issued preventing him from leaving the country. Everything collapsed in the blink of an eye. Julian stood dumbfounded in the middle of the office. Rage and terror exploded in his eyes. He let out a primal roar and swept everything off his desk. He realized it all. It was a trap. A perfect trap set by the wife he had always dismissed. And at that moment, on the operating table, I was fighting for my own life. The red light outside the theater remained on, a sign that the battle continued. Outside, the world of those who had betrayed me was engulfed in flames, and that was only the beginning. I awoke from a long, deep sleep. There was the familiar scent of antiseptic, but this time it didn't feel oppressive. The soft morning sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the tiny dust motes dancing in the air. The surgical site ached, but my mind felt strangely clear and light. Chloe was asleep in a chair by my bed, her hand still holding mine tightly. The door to my room opened quietly, and Dr. Harrison walked in with a kind smile. He checked the numbers on the monitor, and then looked at me. "Good morning, you resilient young lady. Congratulations." The surgery was a complete success. We removed the tumor entirely, and the surrounding lymph nodes are all clear. You've won a very important battle. A single hot tear rolled down my cheek. This time, it wasn't a tear of pain or resentment, but of relief and rebirth. I had won. I had won the fight to reclaim my own life. While I was recovering, the world outside had been turned completely upside down. The storm I had unleashed had swept through the Croft family, leaving nothing in its wake. Every day, Chloe would report the news to me with gleeful satisfaction. "You know, Eleanor, that bastard Julian is being held on remand. He apparently screamed like a wild animal at the police station, but it did him no good. Alistair's evidence is so airtight, he's completely cornered. His parents tried to pull every string they had, calling in decades of favors to get him out, but no one dared to touch it. This case is national news now. With the press all over it, who would be foolish enough to get involved?" I listened quietly, a small smile playing on my lips. That was what I had wanted. For them to feel the same powerlessness, the same feeling of the world turning its back on them, just as they had done to me. "And there's more," Chloe continued. "All their assets, bank accounts, property, stocks, everything has been frozen. Bailiffs have put seizure notices on that palatial house of theirs. Julian's sister is a wreck. She ran back to her parents, but apparently her own in-laws are pressuring her to file for divorce, terrified of being implicated. They lived like royalty in good times. But the moment things get tough, they're the first to run. The downfall was swifter than I could have imagined. A family that had always prided itself on its name and wealth was now the center of public condemnation and contempt. My father-in-law, Richard Croft, reportedly collapsed from high blood pressure and was rushed to the hospital after reading the article exposing his treacherous past, complete with the love letters Eleanor Morgan had given me. My mother-in-law had a complete breakdown, locking herself in the house and refusing to see anyone. The castle they had built on hypocrisy and cruelty had crumbled to dust overnight. I lay in bed, looking out the window. The trees in the hospital grounds were beginning to shed their leaves, heralding the arrival of winter. It would be a harsh winter for them, but for my life, spring was just beginning. More than a sense of triumph, I felt a strange peace. Everything was returning to its rightful place. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. 6 months after the surgery, the first hearing for our divorce and asset division case was held. Though I hadn't fully recovered, I decided to attend in person. I wanted to witness Julian's pathetic downfall with my own eyes. That morning, Chloe chose a simple white dress for me and applied light makeup to hide my pallor. I deliberately refused a wheelchair, walking slowly but steadily with the support of Chloe and Alistair. My appearance, a woman who had battled a serious illness, yet stood tall in the face of adversity, was immediately captured by the lenses of the hundreds of reporters camped outside the courthouse. Flashes went off incessantly, but I remained unfazed. I held my head high, my gaze calm and fixed straight ahead. The courtroom was thick with tension. Julian was brought in. He was a completely different man from 6 months ago. His always impeccably styled hair was disheveled, his face gaunt, his jaw covered in stubble. His eyes were bloodshot. When he saw me, the hatred in them was practically scorching. If not for the guards on either side of him, he probably would have lunged at me. The hearing began. Alistair, with a commanding presence and a firm voice, presented the arguments and evidence one by one. On the large screen, he displayed the photos of Julian and Isabella's blissful life in America, the meticulously traced bank transfers, and finally, the debt restructuring agreement bearing Julian's clear signature. With each piece of evidence, Julian's face grew more contorted. He tried to argue that it was all a trap I had set, that he had been deceived. But in the face of a document bearing his own signature, his words were meaningless. Julian's barrister, likely a young man his family had hastily hired, tried to argue that I had fabricated the whole scheme out of jealousy over my inability to have children. That line of reasoning was immediately dismantled by Alistair. "My lord," Alistair's voice boomed across the courtroom, "my client, Miss Vance, was not only denied the happiness of motherhood, but also suffered through 3 years of deception at the hands of her husband and his entire family. Not only that, but she has just undergone major surgery for stomach cancer, the very disease that claimed her father's life. While she was fighting for her life, the defendant, Julian Croft, was abroad, joyfully awaiting the birth of his child with another woman. I ask the court, what possible defense can there be for such cruelty?" A hush fell over the courtroom. All eyes turned to me with sympathy. I simply lowered my head slightly, giving a timely, subtle tremor of my shoulders. At the end of the hearing, the court declared that it would accept my initial petitions. All disputed assets would remain frozen until the final judgment, and the jointly owned townhouse and other assets would be placed under my temporary management. it was an overwhelming victory. As I left the courtroom with Alistair and Chloe, Julian could no longer contain himself. He broke free from the guards, pointed a finger at my face, and screamed, "Eleanor Vance, you'll regret this." "You bitch! You think you've won? Just you wait." His rage, his ugly true self, was captured by hundreds of cameras. I simply looked back at him, my expression a mixture of pity and contempt. He had lost. He had lost miserably, and he didn't even realize that his own foolish outburst had just served as the final blade that completely destroyed his public image and reputation. While the storm raged in the UK, across the Atlantic, retribution was beginning for the accomplices. The situation with my mother-in-law and her lover, Isabella Rossi, was regularly reported to Alistair by Mr. Davies, which I listened to dispassionately, as if reading a financial report. When the news of Julian's arrest and the freezing of all his assets reached America, the first to act was the high-end international maternity hospital where Isabella was waiting to give birth. Her dream of a lavish birth, treated like a queen, was shattered. With the hospital bills unpaid and no prospect of future payment, the hospital asked my mother-in-law and Isabella to leave. In the midst of that chaos and stress, Isabella went into premature labor. A weak baby boy was born, needing to be placed in an incubator. But the hospital was not a charity. After providing the necessary emergency care, they immediately demanded that the two women settle their bills and transfer the baby to a cheaper public hospital. Mr. Davies sent some very vivid photos. My mother-in-law, who had lived a life of luxury, was now supporting Julian's frail, postpartum mistress. They were a pathetic sight, loaded with bags, leaving the posh hospital. The arrogance was gone from her face, replaced by confusion, fatigue, and humiliation. They could no longer return to the rented villa. The landlord had evicted them for non-payment of rent. An old woman, a young woman, and a premature baby. They ended up finding a cheap motel in a rough neighborhood, filled with the smell of mold and the constant noise from outside. The life of luxury was over. Hell had begun. With no money and no one to help, the simmering conflict between the two women erupted. My mother-in-law, in her shock, began to blame Isabella for everything. "This is all your fault, you little homewrecker." Her voice, captured in a recording by Mr. Davies of one of their furious arguments, was shrill and vicious. "If you hadn't seduced my son, if it wasn't for that belly of yours, my family wouldn't be in this mess. Do you get it now? Julian's in prison. The money is all gone. You've ruined his life." Isabella, physically and emotionally weak after childbirth, no longer maintained her facade of meekness. "You've got some nerve," she screamed back. "Why don't you blame your greedy, stupid son? Did I force him to cheat on his wife and embezzle company funds? You didn't say a word when he was showering me with money, when your whole family was living it up here, did you? Now that it's all gone wrong, you're trying to pin it all on me and this baby? You're the one who's cursed." They insulted each other, even came to physical blows. Everything, from the baby's crying to their daily diet of instant noodles, became a reason to blame one another. Isabella's dream of marrying into wealth had vanished like smoke, leaving only the harsh reality of a premature baby and a bleak future. My mother-in-law had also lost everything: her son, her money, her reputation, and even the grandson she had gambled everything to get. Now, the baby was just a heavy burden in their miserable situation. I read Mr. Davies' reports and looked at the photos of them in their squalid motel room. I felt nothing. This was the price they had to pay. They had sown the wind together. Now, they would reap the whirlwind together. 6 months after the first hearing, Julian's criminal case finally came to an end. During that time, I had focused on my recovery and chemotherapy. I lost a lot of my hair and my body was thinner. But my spirit was resolute. With the help of the loyal executives, I gradually returned to work at Sterling Textiles, stabilizing the company after the media storm. On the day of the sentencing, I didn't go to court. I had no desire to see his pathetic face again. I just watched the news on TV, at home with Chloe. With undeniable evidence and clear charges, the court sentenced Julian Croft to 8 years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. In the civil case, the court also granted our divorce. Of the assets acquired during the marriage, anything related to my inheritance and Sterling Textiles remained my sole property. Julian got nothing. On the TV screen, Julian stood in the dock, listening to the sentence. He didn't scream like a madman this time. He just stood there like a soulless scarecrow, his eyes empty. As the guards led him to the transport vehicle, his father, Richard Croft, lost his composure. He tried to break through the security line towards his son. "Julian, my son!" he cried out in anguish. But when the police restrained him, in his confusion and despair, he suddenly turned and stared directly into the camera lens, as if looking at me, and shouted a cryptic message. "Eleanor Vance, are you satisfied now? You think you've won? Do you really think your father died peacefully for you to get that fortune? Julian was just a pawn." The words, coming through the TV speakers, made my blood run cold. Chloe quickly turned off the TV. "Don't listen to that old fool. He's gone mad. He's just spouting nonsense." But his words echoed in my mind. "Do you really think your father died peacefully?" What did that mean? My father had died of the same stomach cancer I had. The hospital diagnosis was clear. So why, in his moment of ultimate despair, did he bring up my father's death? Faint memories suddenly rushed back. I remembered my father's last days. His health had indeed deteriorated much faster than the doctors had predicted. At the time, Julian had played the role of the perfectly filial son-in-law. He was always preparing special herbal tonics, remedies he claimed to have gotten from a renowned herbalist, to nourish my father. At the time, I was just grateful and moved by his devotion, but thinking back now, something felt off. I remembered one time, after drinking a lotus seed broth Julian had made, my father complained of severe stomach pain. When I asked, Julian explained that my father's body was probably too weak for it. Another time, I remembered my father holding my hand, his eyes weary and worried. He had started to say something about Julian and the company, but then stopped. I had dismissed it as my father's needless worrying. The scattered pieces of memory, the small details I had overlooked, now stitched themselves together to form a horrifying question. Could it be? Could my father's death not have been a natural one from his illness? Could there have been a human hand involved? And could that hand have belonged to the son-in-law my father had cherished and trusted so much? A chill, colder than any I had felt upon discovering the betrayal or receiving my diagnosis, crept up my spine. If this were true, Julian's crime was not just deception and theft, it was murder. I shot to my feet, my eyes sharp. "Chloe, call Alistair. Tell him to come here immediately. It's urgent." I thought my war was over. It turned out there was a far more horrific act yet to be revealed. I had to find the truth. No matter the cost, I had to uncover the truth about my father's death. Epilogue. 1 year later. A year had passed. Enough time for the scar on my body to fade, and for new skin to grow over the wounds in my heart. My hair had grown back. It wasn't as long and thick as before, but I liked the chic, short style. It felt like a symbol of a new me. I had regained my weight, and my regular checkups showed my health was stable. Dr. Harrison called me a miracle, saying my strong will to live had played a huge part in my recovery. After Julian's imprisonment, I became a national figure. My story, a woman betrayed by her husband, who single-handedly fought against a wicked conspiracy and a life-threatening illness to protect her father's legacy, inspired many. Interview requests from TV networks and newspapers flooded in. I initially declined, but then I realized my story could help other women suffering in silence. I agreed to appear on a prestigious talk show. Live on air, I didn't dwell on the pain or the hatred. I spoke about the journey of reclaiming one's life and self-worth. I talked about the importance of financial independence, of being clear-eyed in love, and of the courage to stand up for oneself. My calm demeanor, articulate speech, and extraordinary willpower captivated the audience. I was no longer the pitiful victim of a family scandal, but a symbol of strength and rebirth. Fame didn't change me. It just gave me a new path, a new mission. I decided to use a significant portion of my reclaimed fortune to establish a foundation to support female entrepreneurs. The foundation not only provided funding, but also offered comprehensive support, a team of lawyers, psychologists, and business consultants to help women in difficult marital situations start new, independent lives. On the day of the foundation's launch, I stood on the stage, looking at the faces of hundreds of women in the audience. Their eyes shone with hope. I knew this was the sweetest revenge of all, turning my pain into the power to help others. But even amidst my busy work and social activities, there was still a ghost that haunted me. The investigation into my father's death, which Alistair was conducting discreetly, had hit a dead end. After 5 years, there was almost no physical evidence left. My father's medical records only showed the typical progression of a terminal cancer patient. The tonics Julian had brought could not be found. Everything remained a suspicion, a quiet agony in my heart that never subsided. I knew that until the truth was revealed, my father's soul could not truly rest, and a chapter in my own life would remain unfinished. After a year of relentless work, I decided to give myself a real holiday. I chose Paris, a city my father had adored. I hoped that by walking the streets he had walked, by breathing the air he had loved, my soul could find true peace. One afternoon, under a honey-gold sun, I was strolling along the Seine and wandered into an old bookshop tucked away in an alley. The scent of old paper and time put me at ease. As I was flipping through a leather-bound book on Renaissance art, a gentle, low voice spoke in English beside me. "Excuse me, are you, by any chance, Eleanor Vance?" I looked up and froze. The man standing before me had a familiar, handsome, and intelligent face. He looked equally surprised to see me. "Eleanor, it is you, isn't it? Leo? Leo Henderson?" The name escaped my lips before I could think. It was Leo, a brilliant senior from my university days, a man my father had greatly admired and often praised. He was a prodigious talent in the architecture department who had left for France on a full scholarship immediately after graduation. We hadn't seen each other in over a decade. We were both delighted by the unexpected reunion. We decided to have coffee at a small nearby cafe. Leo had become a successful architect in Paris. He told me about his work and his life in France. He was still single, with the same romantic air and warm smile I remembered. As I told him the tumultuous story of my life, he just listened quietly, his eyes full of sympathy and respect. "You've been so strong, Eleanor. Your father would be incredibly proud of you." Looking down from heaven. At the mention of my father, a wave of sadness washed over me again. I absent-mindedly took out a small book on Eastern herbal medicine from my bag, a book my father had loved, that I always carried with me. As I flipped through the yellowed pages, I discovered a small folded piece of paper tucked deep inside. I had no memory of putting it there. Curious, I unfolded it. It was my father's handwriting. On the paper were the names of several Chinese medicinal herbs with notes on their effects. But on the last line, my father had circled 2 unfamiliar herbs. Next to them was a large question mark and a hastily scrawled note. "Julian's tonic. Ask Dr. Chen again." Dr. Chen was my father's herbalist friend. My heart stopped. I vaguely remembered reading somewhere that while these 2 herbs were harmless on their own, when combined with a specific ingredient in the lotus seed broth Julian often made and taken over a long period, they could slowly destroy the stomach lining, aggravate a cancer patient's condition, and neutralize the effects of Western medicine. "Leo," I said, handing him the paper with a trembling hand. "Look at this." Leo took the paper, read it carefully, and his brow furrowed. He immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "This Dr. Chen, do you know where he is?" "I'm not sure, but Alistair could probably find him." "Eleanor," Leo said, placing his hand over mine. His gaze was firm. "I have some friends in the European pharmaceutical industry. They can help analyze the toxicity of this combination more deeply. Don't worry. You're not alone in this. We'll find the truth together." I looked at him, and for the first time, in a very long time, I felt a warmth bloom in my heart. We left the cafe and walked together under the slowly setting sun along the Seine, our 2 shadows stretching long on the cobblestone path. The investigation into my father's death had found a new ray of light, and more importantly, I now had a trusted companion by my side. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that a new, brighter, and more hopeful chapter of my life had truly begun.